College in the United States is extremely antisocial, and I'm pretty sure my experience going to college made me even more socially retarded than I would be otherwise. I've never been anywhere else where the average person is so arrogant and it's such a spiritually depraved institution. And I'm talking about the students and the professors, by the way. There's this misconception people have that college is a place where everybody's socializing and everybody's partying, everybody's trying to make friends with each other. I think a lot of people expect college to be the peak of their social life, but that's definitely not true in my experience. And I think it's not true for the vast majority of people. Growing up, I always thought college was going to be like this huge nonstop party. I thought it was going to be a place where you could reinvent yourself, a place where people are more open-minded. I don't know if maybe it used to be like that, or if it's just that some people do get to have an experience like that while others don't. But when I was growing up, we had all these college movies like Old School, Van Wilder, Revenge of the Nerds, Road Trip, and so many more that all made college look like this magical land of opportunity. Then when I finally got there, I found out that it's actually not like that at all. College is actually a very antisocial place. All these movies and everything had led me to believe it was going to be nonstop open house parties and everybody would be socializing all the time. That wasn't my experience at all. I did end up going to one party during my time in college, but even that was a very antisocial experience. I wasn't even supposed to be invited in the first place, and then when I got there, I just stood against the wall for a couple hours and then I left because pretty much nobody was interacting with me at all. I did have a bit of a non-standard college experience, as in I went to college for, I think, 3 semesters right after high school. Then I just stopped going to class altogether because my social anxiety was so bad, I just couldn't stand to be there anymore. So I didn't even officially withdraw, I just stopped going to class. So then I failed all my classes and I ended up getting expelled. Then a year after that, I went to community college. Then eventually I went back to a regular 4-year university. So basically, I was a little bit older than the average student for most of my college career. So maybe that played into my personal experience to some degree. But I really don't think things would have been much different either way. Because even when I was the same age as all my peers, the first time I tried going to college before I dropped out, nobody ever seemed interested in making friends with new people. It seemed like everybody was already in an established friend group. I specifically remember in a lot of the intro classes that everybody has to take to fulfill their gen ed requirements, a lot of times in the first class of the semester, the teacher would have us do some kind of team building exercise, or everyone would be asked to introduce themselves and maybe share an interesting fact about themselves, that sort of thing. Which I always hated that kind of thing back then, but now I'm kind of coming around to it, or I get it at least. Like, I understand the point. They're trying to help people socialize a little bit, which is an important skill to have. A skill that a lot of people are lacking these days, including myself. But yeah, I remember one class on the first day, this was an intro to sociology. On the first day of the class, we were all supposed to go around the room, and the goal was you were supposed to find the person in the class that has a birthday closest to your own birthday. I guess the goal of the exercise is just to get everyone talking to each other. So we had like 10 minutes to find the person with the closest birthday to our own. Then at the end, everyone would take turns introducing their birthday partner. Well, I noticed most people never even got out of their seats. Some people were talking, but mostly it was just people talking to their friends that they're sitting with. The teacher even said something halfway through like, "I don't see a lot of people talking to each other. You only have 5 minutes left." So then at the end, the teacher asked the first person to introduce whoever it was they found that has the closest birthday. So it was this girl, and I don't remember the actual birthdays, but basically she was like, okay, my name is Samantha, and my birthday is September 14th. And this is Marissa. Her birthday is July 9th. You know, it was something like that where the birthdays weren't even close. Then the teacher was like, okay, does anyone have a birthday that's closer to September 14th? Then nobody said anything. Then the teacher goes, okay, does anyone else have a birthday in September? Then two people rose their hands. You know, these two girls obviously, they walked into the classroom together, they sat together, they already knew each other, probably went to high school together. So then, after maybe the third person, the teacher was like, okay, forget about the birthdays. When it's your turn, just introduce yourself. So, yeah, the whole exercise was a total failure. Even when specifically asked to socialize, pretty much nobody was actually willing to talk to anyone that they didn't already know. I always think back to this every time I hear people talking about how the youth these days are so antisocial. You know, people say, these kids these days can't even function in society. This story I just told, this happened in either 2007 or 2008. I don't doubt that people are even worse nowadays, but if my experience is anything to go by, college has been a social dead end for a long time. I'm sure if you're just an extreme extrovert with amazing social skills and you're really good looking and everything, then yeah, in that case, you probably will make friends in college. You might have a great social life in college. But from what I saw, it always seemed like the only people that would actually ever talk to each other in class. You know, I can't know for sure the social history of every single person I ever had class with, but it always seemed like the only people that actually socialized in class were people that already knew each other. And yeah, here and there, you know, people might be like, hey, can I borrow your stapler? Or, hey, did you do the homework last night? You know, I'm not saying people literally never talk to anybody else, but for the most part, I didn't see people making new friends. Just everybody just already had their established friend group. Now, the schools I went to were more of what you would call a commuter school, meaning that most of the students, aside from the foreign students, most of the students were local to the area. So there definitely was a lot of people that knew each other from high school. Maybe things might be a little different at one of those big party schools like Arizona State or Ohio State or something like that. But in my experience, very few people were actually open to making new friends. Everybody already had their friend group established before they even went to college. And this is something that Avery Yaps also mentioned in his video about how antisocial the college experience is. So I know I'm not the only one that's noticed this. And to anyone that wants to say, well, your problem is you just never put yourself out there. Well, I did try. So let me tell you about that. Let me tell you about how I tried to put myself out there. After I went back to college, after getting expelled and then going through community college, I got accepted back to a regular 4-year university. So at that point, I was a bit more mature, I guess you could say. I was very focused. I was on my grizzy like a motherfucker, so to speak. I was really trying to make something of myself. Okay, so when I got back to a regular university, I had to take a class called Engineering Orientation, which was basically just a way for the school to squeeze a few extra bucks out of all the engineering students. And by a few extra bucks, I mean probably at least a couple thousand, because fuck you if you're a broke college student. Don't you know there's some middle-aged admins out there with zero useful real-world skills that deserve your hard-earned money more than you do? Oh, you didn't know that? But anyways, so I had to take this engineering orientation class, and one of the assignments in the class was to attend a club meeting on campus, and you had to get a club officer to sign a sheet of paper proving that you were there. So they gave us a list of clubs to choose from, and one of the clubs was this robotics club. So I thought that looked interesting. So I went to a meeting Then, because I was really trying to do anything I could to improve my resume, I decided to actually join this club. So I started going to meetings every week. Then, after a few meetings, they assigned all of the new members to teams. So every team was going to be working on their own robot that we're all going to be competing in this big competition at the end of the semester. And every team was made up exclusively of new members plus one senior member that would be the team leader. So I was put on a team with 4 other guys, not including the team leader. One of those guys was a very autistic guy that was really into Sonic the Hedgehog, so he was pretty cool. Then the other 3 guys on my team were these 3 guys that all knew each other already from high school. Okay, so when it came time for us to actually start working on the robot, we were actually repurposing a robot they had used the year before in this competition, so we weren't actually building it from scratch. But I remember going to a meeting one day, and this was like 7 meetings deep or something like that, so I did give it a sincere effort. Well, we're at the meeting, and the 3 guys that were friends from high school, they just started taking the wheels off the robot, and they were kind of talking amongst themselves. I didn't know what they were doing exactly because they never said anything about this beforehand to the rest of the group. They just started doing all this stuff. I remember they took the wheels off, and then they were measuring some things. So at that point, I was just standing there awkwardly watching. Nobody was saying anything to me. They were just doing whatever they were doing. I remember the Sonic guy, he started to try to take one of the wheels off, and one of the 3 amigos was like, "Whoa, hold up. We're not taking that one off yet." So Sonic guy was just like, "Oh," and he just backed up very meekly. He was pretty much in the same position I was, just standing there wondering what the fuck these other guys are even doing. And I did try asking, by the way. At some point after I'd been standing there for a few minutes, I was like, "So, what are we doing right now?" And I am pretty sure they heard me because I waited for a quiet moment and everything before I spoke up, but nobody responded. They all acted like they didn't hear me. Then I looked at Sonic Guy and he just shrugged his shoulders. He was just as lost as I was. We were both being excluded. So I was doing my best to look like I was participating or look like I wanted to participate. I was hoping one of them would eventually explain what they're doing, as long as I made it clear that I am there and I am wanting to participate in this. Because I was thinking, well, maybe they just forgot about me. So I was standing close to the workbench and I was paying attention to everything they're doing. Then one of those moments happened where, and I'm sure if you have social anxiety at all, then you've probably experienced this, but it was one of those moments where I'm standing there not saying anything, just feeling very anxious, very awkward. Honestly, I just wanted to participate. I wanted to be part of the group. So I was kind of standing in a spot around the table as if I was participating, basically standing in a circle with these guys with the robot between us. Then 2 of those guys looked up at each other, like they saw me, then they looked at each other and they laughed. They both laughed, but they tried not to laugh. But they were laughing at me. They were laughing at how awkward I was being, I guess. Because I'm sure in their minds, they probably didn't even feel like they were excluding me and the Sonic guy. They're probably thinking, well, they could take a bit of initiative if they wanted to participate. But really, I did take initiative. I literally asked them what the fuck they're doing, and they all ignored me. Sonic Guy also tried to get in on the action, and he got shut down. So, what do you even do in that situation? I'll tell you what I did. After they laughed, well, they both walked away right after that. They didn't leave the room or anything, but I don't know, they went to the other side of the table or something. Then I continued to stand around awkwardly for a few minutes. And here's the other thing, too. It was kind of a cramped area where we were at, so these guys kept going back and forth, grabbing different tools or whatever, and they kept having to pass by me. And every time it was like I would have to lean away to try to make room for them to come through. And that made the whole thing worse because I just felt like I was getting in their way. So I stood there for a few more minutes. Then I just left without saying anything. And I never went to any more meetings. I did send an email to the team leader to say that I was quitting. I think I just said I have something else I had to do in that time slot. But he never even replied. So, yeah, I tried to put myself out there. I joined a club and I really did want to be a part of it. But those three guys pretty much excluded me. It was very antisocial. And the thing about it, too, I'd be willing to bet none of them even see it that way. If they even remembered me at all for more than 2 weeks, they probably thought that I'm the antisocial one because I didn't speak up enough or whatever. They're probably blissfully unaware of how unwelcome they made me and the Sonic guy feel. And the thing where they laughed at me, I've had that same thing happen to me so many times where, for some reason or another, I'll end up in the mix with some people that are friends with each other, and it'll just be them and me. And I can tell it's like they probably would be having a conversation if I wasn't there, but my presence is making them feel awkward, so they laugh. They just can't help but laugh. Another thing that makes college such an antisocial experience is the way that everyone's always trying to one-up each other. Nobody wants to show even an ounce of weakness, or not even necessarily weakness, but everyone wants to try to act like they're so smart and they're so special compared to everyone else. One thing I noticed that is rampant in college classrooms is nobody is honest about how much time they had to spend studying or how much work they had to put in on a project. Everyone's always trying to act like, psh, nah, I didn't even have to study for that test. It was easy. I remember one time this guy in my class asked me if I had done the homework yet, and I said I had. So then he asked how long it took, and I said, probably about 2 hours, which was pretty typical for the assignments in that class. It was a design class. The assignments were usually doing something in AutoCAD. Then this guy reacted like, 2 hours? Yikes! I figured it would be like all the other homework so far. So I said, it was pretty similar to other assignments. Then he was like, how'd it take 2 hours then? And I was like, I don't know. That's just how long it took. So then he goes, well, if it's like all the other assignments we've had, then it should only take 10 minutes tops. And I just stopped talking at that point. The guy was so full of shit, I didn't even know what to say. I mean, I can admit that I am a bit of a slow worker, and I was brand new to AutoCAD back then, so I don't doubt that this guy might have been able to complete the assignments in less time than what it took me, but 10 minutes is an egregious understatement. I promise you, even if you were an AutoCAD expert, you still would not be finishing these assignments in 10 minutes. I don't know if the guy was just lying to look smart, or maybe he's really just that bad at judging how long it took him to do something, but just think about how antisocial this is. I'm sitting there telling him that it took me about 2 hours, and I also said it was similar to past assignments, so he should be able to deduce from that past assignments must have also taken me about 2 hours to complete. So what's even the point of reacting like he did? I'm pretty sure he was just trying to make me feel stupid. Another antisocial interaction I had, I can't even remember what class this was in, but basically I got my homework back and I had this one problem marked wrong, but then when I checked my work, it wasn't wrong. So I emailed the teaching assistant that graded the homework and I explained why my answer was correct. Then she emailed me back arguing that no, I was wrong, and she sent me her solution, which I already had, by the way. They gave us the printout of the solutions when they gave us the homework. But yeah, If I recall correctly, the issue was that there was a negative sign somewhere early on in the problem that she was missing. So we emailed back and forth a couple times, and it was like, I could tell she's not actually reading my emails. She just kept saying I was wrong, even though I was very clearly explaining exactly where she made a mistake in her solution. So eventually she just replies and she says something like, I don't have time for this. Talk to the professor if you think there's a problem. So I should have done that so the professor could see how retarded his teaching assistant was. But instead of that, I guess just because I'm such a nice guy, what I did was I printed out her solution and I got a red pen and I circled the part where she made a mistake. Then I scanned it and sent it back to her. Then eventually she replied, and I remember she still never said sorry or even admitted she was wrong. Her reply just said something like, I've submitted a correction to your grade. Then I checked the grade online and yeah, she had changed it, so now I had full credit. So obviously, she must have agreed that I was right. It was such a simple thing, too. I'm not even mad about initially getting the points marked off. People make mistakes. That's fine. I'm not going to get too upset about that. But the way she argued about it when it was obvious she wasn't even reading my messages. She wasn't even reading my explanation of why I deserve credit for the problem. I just don't understand how people can be like that. It's not just other students that are antisocial. It's also the professors. I had two professors in particular that were just so arrogant, it's hard to imagine how they even had jobs to begin with. Psych! Actually, it's easy to imagine why they had the jobs they did because, in my experience, antisocial, arrogant pricks tend to be highly successful in any field they choose to go into. But yeah, the first antisocial professor I had, he wasn't even a professor really. He was just a teacher at the community college I went to. This guy taught chemistry at community college, which, if you don't know, you don't have to have a PhD to teach in community college. But apparently this guy did have a PhD, and he made it a point on the first day of class to make damn sure everybody knows it. I remember he had probably one of the greatest quotes of all time. He said, I am not a teacher, I am a chemist. Which immediately made me think of Walter White, except even in season 1 of Breaking Bad, I'm pretty sure Walt wasn't that arrogant. And also, it's like, the man quite literally was working as a teacher at community college. He was old as shit, so I think he might have just been doing this for extra money after retiring from industry, but still, at that time, he was literally a teacher. But yeah, I remember one time in lab, I went to ask him a question, which I usually never ask questions because of my anxiety, my social anxiety. But my lab partner had already asked the teacher a question. Then we came across another part in the lab where neither of us knew what to do. So my partner was like, I asked last time, it's your turn. So, social pressure from both sides, I kind of had to do it, But anyways, I go to ask this teacher a question and I was like, Mr. Smith, what does, and he cut me off and he just goes, doctor. So I was like, what? And he goes, it's Dr. Smith. I'm not a mister, I'm a doctor. And I remember he just sounded so pissed off. So I was just like, oh, sorry. Then I asked the question. And look, I can understand, he probably worked his ass off to get his PhD in chemistry. I get it. That's not easy. So I can understand if he wants people to refer to him by doctor. It's not like I was trying to insult him. I was just used to all my teachers not having PhDs since this was a community college, so I just wasn't thinking about it. But it's really not a big deal. I'm not even upset that he corrected me. If he had done it in a respectful way, then I wouldn't even feel the need to be telling y'all right now that this arrogant prick also smelled like shit. But here we are. Okay, then there was an actual professor I had after I went back to an actual university. And this guy wasn't just a professor, he was also dean of the College of Engineering. So he was a pretty big deal, I guess. But holy shit, what a horrible teacher. I had this guy for fluid mechanics, which, fluid mechanics, it's a tough subject no matter how you teach it, but he just made it so much more difficult than it had to be. He had this very strict rule that all assignments were to be turned in on the due date before class begins, which I respect that. I don't think he should be accepting late assignments. But I remember, so the way we turned the homework in was we would place it in a stack on this certain table that was in the front of the classroom. And I remember one day, this girl walked in literally less than a minute after class started, but the professor hadn't actually started teaching yet. He did say something, like, how's everyone doing today, blah, blah, blah. So if you were there, it was clear that class had begun, but he hadn't actually got started with the lecture yet. So this girl walks in like 30, 45 seconds late, and she's walking by the table on her way to get to her seat. So she put her homework on the stack, and the professor got up and he stormed over there and he just snatched her homework off the top of the stack. And then he took it straight over and threw it in the trash. Meanwhile, this girl was just sitting there petrified. Then the professor was like, homework is to be turned in before class begins. Which again, I'm fine with having that strict deadline. In fact, I agree with it, but he was so fucking mean about it. And honestly, the girl probably didn't even realize she was late. So it was just like, how freaking arrogant and narcissistic, whatever, like, do you have to be to act like that? It was ridiculous. Then there was another time with this same professor after a big exam where most of the class failed because truthfully, the exam was too hard. There was problems on there that we had never seen anything similar on all the homework assignments and the lectures. It was like he was specifically trying to come up with the most edge case problems he could that technically could still be considered to be related to the material we were supposed to be tested on. But yeah, after we got our grades back, everybody's asking him all these questions, and understandably, a lot of people were upset, but nobody spoke out of turn. People were just trying to express that the exam really wasn't fair. Oh, and I forgot an important part. The professor was mad at the class for doing poorly on the exam. After he handed them back out, he went on this whole tirade about how he's never had a class make such bad grades in his entire career, and he kept saying the exam was easy and we all should have aced it. So then after we were going over the solutions and everybody's asking him all these questions, trying to help him understand that no, the exam was not easy. Actually, it wasn't even fair. It was so hard. He got so mad. And it was like, as people kept asking different questions as he's like going through the solutions of all the problems, he was progressively getting more and more angry that people just didn't understand it, So he eventually gets to a point, he got so mad, he goes, look, teaching is not my job. Research is my job. Research is how the university earns money. That is what they're paying me for. And he had more to it. Like he went on a whole rant, but it's such a crazy perspective to hear coming from the freaking dean of the College of Engineering. It would be crazy enough to hear that just from any random professor, but he was the dean. He was a dean of the whole College of Engineering. And also, it's like, if that were true, then why the hell is tuition like $10,000 a semester or whatever it was? The school was, at that time, and is still obviously, making a whole lot of money off the students. Research is part of what a university does, of course. It's a very important part. You can argue that research maybe even is more important than teaching the students. That's a matter of perspective. You could make that argument. I would say education is the more important goal of a professor's job. But whichever one you think is more important, both things are part of the job. Teaching, educating the students, preparing them for a career in the field, obviously that is important. Obviously that is part of the professor's duties. Or it should be, but this guy obviously didn't think so. But yeah, from my experience, college is just a very antisocial place, coming from students and teachers. Everybody's got a big ego. Nobody really wants to socialize any more than they have to. It's just a miserable experience all around. Honestly, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't go to college. I'm not saying it's not the best path for some people, just depends on your particular circumstances, but I should not have wasted my time on that bull crap. If anything I said here resonates with you, please consider watching some of my other videos. There's also some secret videos you can watch for free on my Patreon, videos YouTube doesn't want you to see, so check that out. No sign up required, you can just watch the videos. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.